Footsteps echoed through the damp alleyway, heavy and deliberate. Nobody looked twice at Penelope Gallagher. To the residents of Boston's North End, Penny was just the fat, quiet girl who ran the corner bakery, always hidden beneath oversized cardigans and a timid, apologetic smile. People pitied her. Whispers in the neighborhood called her a tragic, lonely woman who ate her feelings. They were all entirely wrong. Dustin Rossi, the ruthless head of the city's most feared syndicate, didn't see a weak, chubby baker. When he stared into her dark eyes across a dimly lit interrogation room, he saw the one mastermind holding the digital keys to his absolute destruction. Morning sunlight filtered through the frosted glass of Sweet Crumb Bakery, casting a warm golden hue over the display cases filled with cannoli, sfogliatelle, and dusted croissants. Penelope Gallagher stood behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine with practiced, rhythmic motions. She was a heavy woman, possessing a soft, round face, thick thighs, and a waist that she purposefully obscured beneath baggy, flour-dusted aprons. Her brown hair was perpetually tied in a messy bun, secured with a wooden chopstick. Customers came in for the pastries, but they also came for the subtle boost to their own egos. Standing next to plump, quiet, unassuming Penny made the ambitious women of the financial district feel powerful, and it made the local men feel aggressively protective or utterly dismissive. Penny preferred the dismissal. It was the greatest camouflage in the world. "Morning, Penny," chirped Clara Higgins, a regular who always ordered a skim latte while loudly complaining about her diet. Clara eyed the bear claws with tragic longing. "You look exhausted, honey. You need to get out more. Meet a nice man. You can't just bake your life away." "I'm all right, Clara," Penny replied, her voice a soft, breathy whisper. "Just trying to keep the inventory organized." "Well, you're a sweetheart. Don't let the world walk all over you," Clara said, taking her coffee and bustling out the door. Penny watched her go, the timid smile melting from her face, leaving behind an expression of cold, sharp calculation. If Clara only knew. When the clock struck 7 in the evening, the bakery closed. The open sign was flicked to closed, the shades were drawn, and the sweet aroma of vanilla was replaced by the low hum of heavy-duty servers hidden behind a false wall in the stockroom. The apron came off. Penny sat down in an ergonomic mesh chair that creaked slightly under her weight. She cracked her knuckles, the soft dimple flesh of her hands looking entirely incongruous, hovering over a glowing, custom-built mechanical keyboard. Penelope Gallagher was not just a baker. She was Ghost, a phantom forensic accountant and elite black hat hacker who specialized in tracking, seizing, and rerouting the illicit funds of the Eastern Seaboard's most dangerous organized crime syndicates. Her monitors flickered to life, illuminating her round cheeks in a ghostly blue light. For the past 6 months, she had been meticulously unraveling the financial web of the Rossi family. Dustin Rossi had taken over the syndicate 2 years ago after his father's sudden stroke. Dustin was a ghost in his own right, brutal, efficient, and obsessed with modernizing the mob. He didn't deal in street-level shakedowns. He dealt in offshore shell companies, cryptocurrency laundering rings, and real estate extortion. Penny's fingers danced across the keys. She wasn't just hacking into bank accounts, she was manipulating the routing algorithms of a private Swiss bank used by the Rossis. Tonight was the night. A transfer of $85 million pension funds stolen from a corrupt union boss and laundered through 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands was scheduled to move into Dustin Rossi's primary untraceable ledger. "Let's see how smart you really are, Dustin," Penny murmured, her voice losing its breathy, timid quality, dropping into a confident, steady alto. With a final, decisive strike of the Enter key, the routing number altered. The code deployed, masking the alteration within the bank's own security updates. The $85 million didn't go to the Rossi ledger. It went into a digital purgatory, an encrypted holding account that only Penny could access. She leaned back, feeling the adrenaline spike in her chest. She had just stolen from the devil. and the devil was going to notice. Across town, in the penthouse of a luxury high-rise overlooking the Boston Harbor, Dustin Rossi threw a heavy crystal whiskey tumbler against a reinforced glass window. It shattered instantly, raining glittering shards onto the Persian rug. "Say that to me again," Dustin said. His voice was deathly quiet. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of slate. Arthur Pendleton, his lead financial advisor, a man sweating profusely through his expensive silk shirt, trembled. "The funds, Mr. Rossi. But they didn't arrive." The routing was intercepted during the bounce through Geneva. "Intercepted," Dustin repeated, the word tasting foul in his mouth. "By whom? The feds?" No, Arthur stammered, frantically wiping his forehead. "Not the feds. It was a surgical strike. Single user. The encryption left a signature. Just a ghost protocol. Someone took the money, sealed it, and left a digital lock. We can't find it." Dustin walked slowly toward Arthur, his presence suffocating the room. $85 million doesn't just vanish into thin air, Arthur. Money leaves a trail. Find the entry point. "We did," Arthur whispered, terrified. "The IP bounce traces back to a localized node, a neighborhood in the North End." Dustin's jaw tightened. "A local? Someone in my own city is stealing from me." He turned to his underboss, a hulking, scarred man named Anthony. "Tony, get the tech team. Triangulate the exact address. We're going to pay a visit." 2 days later, the bell above Sweet Crumb Bakery chimed. Penny was at the counter arranging a fresh tray of lemon tarts. She wore a bulky, pale yellow cardigan that made her look even rounder, her hair falling in messy, flour-dusted strands around her face. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. 3 men walked in. The 2 in the back were built like brick walls, their eyes scanning the bakery with professional paranoia. But it was the man in the front who commanded all the oxygen. Dustin Rossi. Up close, he was even more intimidating than his digital dossier suggested. He moved with a terrifying, contained grace, his dark eyes sweeping over the pastel-pink walls, the quaint chalkboard menu, and finally landing on Penny. Penny's heart hammered against her ribs, but her training took over. She instantly shrank into herself, her shoulders rounding, her eyes widening in perfect textbook panic. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron, taking a physical step back. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she stammered, her voice pitched high and wavering. We don't have a lot of bread left today. Just pastries." Dustin stepped up to the counter. He looked down at her. He saw exactly what she wanted him to see. A fat, trembling, pathetic baker who looked like she might burst into tears if he spoke too loudly. "We're not here for bread," Dustin said smoothly, his baritone voice vibrating with quiet menace. He placed a single leather-gloved hand on the glass display case. "Are you the owner, Penelope Gallagher?" Yes," Penny whispered, looking down at her shoes. Did I forget her permit? I paid my neighborhood dues to Mr. Moretti last month. I swear I did." Dustin studied her. The tech team had traced the localized signal to this block and then specifically to the electrical grid attached to this very building. They assumed the hacker was renting the apartment upstairs, but they had found it completely empty. The only tenant in the entire building was the chubby baker in front of him. "I'm not here about your protection dues, Miss Gallagher," Dustin said, leaning slightly closer. He inhaled. She smelled like butter, vanilla, and fear. "I'm looking for a tenant. Someone using an excessive amount of power in this building." "Power?" Penny's lip trembled. "I have 3 commercial ovens. They use a lot of electricity. Is that a crime?" She looked up at him, her dark eyes swimming with unshed tears. It was a masterful performance. She used her weight, her softness, her societal invisibility as a shield. People like Dustin Rossi, apex predators, did not look at women like Penny and see threats. They saw prey. They saw irrelevance. Dustin stared at her face, the soft, doughy cheeks, the fearful eyes. It was impossible. This trembling woman couldn't be the architect of the most sophisticated cyber heist in Mafia history. "Check the back," Dustin ordered Tony. "No, please," Penny cried out, stepping out from behind the counter, using her bulk to clumsily block the swinging door. "My health inspector score, you can't go back there without harness, please. You'll ruin my livelihood." Tony simply shoved her aside. He didn't hit hard, but the casual violence was enough to send Penny stumbling back, landing heavily on a flour sack with a sharp gasp. Dustin watched her fall. He felt a fleeting, bizarre flicker of distaste at Tony's roughness, but squashed it immediately. He watched as Penny scrambled backward, clutching her knee, tears finally spilling down her plump cheeks. "Tear the place apart," Dustin said coldly. For 30 minutes the men ravaged the bakery. They smashed drywall, flipped tables, and kicked in doors. Penny sat on the floor, weeping loudly, rocking herself back and forth. But behind her tear-soaked hands, her dark eyes tracked their every move. She wasn't watching the destruction, she was calculating their search patterns. She knew they wouldn't find the server room. It was built behind a foot of solid, lead-lined concrete, accessible only through a false panel inside the industrial freezer. Tony emerged from the back, covered in flour and visibly angry. "Nothing, boss, just sugar and rats. The electrical pull is coming from the ovens." Dustin frowned. His instincts, which had kept him alive in a world of cutthroats, were screaming at him. The tech was flawless. The location was accurate. The only anomaly was the woman on the floor. He walked slowly over to Penny, crouching down so he was eye level with her. She flinched, shrinking back against the counter. "You're a very frightened woman, Penelope," Dustin said softly. "You destroyed my store," she sobbed, burying her face in her arms. "I did," he agreed. He reached out, his gloved fingers catching a strand of her messy brown hair. She froze. "But I'm wondering why a woman who was so terrified of me didn't reach for the panic button I saw wired under the register. I also wonder why, when Tony pushed you, your eyes immediately darted to the industrial freezer instead of the exit." Penny's breath hitched, a microscopic slit. Dustin smiled, a cold, terrifying expression. "You're a good actress, but you have tells. Pick her up, Tony. We're taking her for a ride." "No. No!" Penny screamed, thrashing as Tony grabbed her arms, hauling her heavy frame upward with a grunt of effort. "I don't know anything, please." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Dustin said, adjusting his cuffs. "But I think underneath all this sugar and flour there's a rat hiding, and I excel at extermination." The safe house was a brutalist concrete structure on the edge of the harbor, cold and unfeeling. Penny was thrown into a metal chair in the center of a windowless room. Eerily light came from a harsh fluorescent bulb dangling overhead. She slumped in the chair, her chest heaving, the oversized cardigan slipping off one shoulder. She looked like a pathetic, broken doll. Dustin walked into the room, stripping off his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. He pulled up a chair and sat backward, resting his arms on the backrest, staring at her. 85 million, Dustin said, his voice echoing in the barren room. "That's what went missing, traced to your bakery." "I don't know what you're talking about," Penny cried, her voice raw. "I make cakes, I sell coffee. Please, Mr. Rossi, I'm just a nobody." Dustin leaned forward. "A nobody who pays her mob dues precisely on the 14th of every month, using a localized bank draft that avoids any digital footprint. A nobody whose tax records show a bakery operating at a net zero loss for 3 years, yet you never miss rent. A nobody who has 3 commercial ovens, but only orders enough flour to run 2. Penny stopped crying. The sudden cessation of her tears was so abrupt it made the room feel deafeningly silent. She kept her head down for a long moment. When she finally looked up, the timid, frightened rabbit was entirely gone. Her dark eyes were flat, calm, and chinningly intelligent. "You forgot the yeast," Penny said, her voice completely changed. The breathy, high-pitched squeak was replaced by a smooth, dark alto. Dustin froze. "Excuse me?" Penny sat up straighter in the metal chair, rolling her shoulders to release the tension of her fake cowering. She didn't look like a victim anymore. Despite her size, despite the flour on her face and the messy hair, she suddenly radiated absolute authority. "You checked the flour supply, but you didn't check the yeast invoices," Penny stated calmly. "If you had, you'd realize I'm over-ordering yeast by 40%. I sell the excess to a local brewery under the table. That covers the rent margin. If you're going to audit me, Mr. Rossi, do it properly." Dustin stared at her, genuinely taken aback. He let out a low, slow breath. Well, the fat girl speaks." Penny didn't flinch at the insult. She smiled. It was a razor-sharp, terrifying smile. "Yes, the fat girl. Nothing. The invisible girl. The one you walked right past. The one your gorillas shoved to the ground without a second thought. It's my greatest asset, really. Men like you are blinded by your own arrogance and superficiality. You look at me and see weakness. You see someone who eats too much because she's sad. You don't see a threat." "Are you a threat, Penelope?" Dustin asked, his hand drifting toward the holster at his waist. "I have $85 million of your money sitting in an encrypted vault that requires a rotating 256-bit key that only exists in my head," Penny replied, unblinking. "If my heart stops, a dead man's switch activates, and that money is automatically donated in $5 increments to thousands of registered charities across the globe. Good luck getting it back from the Red Cross." Dustin's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground together. He pulled his gun, slamming the barrel onto the metal table between them. "I can peel your skin off an inch at a time until you give me the key." "You could," Penny agreed, leaning forward, resting her plump elbows on the table, entirely unfazed by the weapon, "but then you'd miss out on the other $300 million I'm going to help you steal." The broom went dead silent again. Dustin narrowed his eyes, searching her face for a bluff. He found none. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded softly. "My name is Penelope Gallagher. That on the dark web, you and your advisors know me as Ghost." Dustin's breath hitched. Ghost. The legendary freelancer. The hacker who had dismantled the Russian breakfast supply chain in New York 2 years ago, vanishing without a trace. The underworld thought Ghost was a rogue NSA agent or a cartel asset. "You?" Dustin scoffed, though the doubt in his voice was rapidly fading. "Your Ghost?" "Your Ghost. I am," Penny said. "And I didn't steal your $85 million to keep it, Rossi. I stole it to get your attention, because I need a Mafia boss and you're the smartest one left on the board." "Need me for what?" "To destroy Liam O'Banion," Penny said, her voice suddenly turning to absolute ice. The name of the Irish syndicate leader hung in the air. 2 years ago, Liam O'Banion ordered a hit on a journalist who was getting too close to his port smuggling operations. That journalist was my older brother. The police did nothing. The FBI did nothing. They said he was a casualty of a turf war. Penny stood up. Dustin tensed that she simply crossed her arms over her chest, towering in her own way, her presence filling the room. "I don't have the muscle to tear down O'Banion's empire," Penny continued, staring directly into Dustin's eyes. "But you do. You have the guns. You have the men. You just lack the intelligence network to bypass his secure grid. I have that network. I am that network. You help me systematically dismantle O'Banion, and I give you your $85 million back. Plus, I will hand you all of O'Banion's assets on a silver platter. $300 million in clean, untraceable cash." Dustin looked at the woman standing before him. She was heavy, messy, and entirely out of place in a Mafia interrogation room. Yet she held more power in her brilliant mind than all his armed men combined. She wasn't asking for his help. She was extorting him into an alliance. A slow, dark smile spread across Dustin Rossi's face. The game had completely changed. "Sit down, Penelope," Dustin said, gesturing to the chair. "Let's talk business." Thick black cables snaked across the imported mahogany floor of Dustin Rossi's private study, transforming the opulent space into a makeshift command center. Servers hummed with a low, vibrating intensity, casting an eerie blue glow over the walls lined with leather-bound first editions. Sitting in the center of the organized chaos was Penelope Gallagher. She had traded her flour-dusted cardigans for a simple, oversized black sweater and comfortable dark jeans, her bulk sinking into the plush leather of Dustin's executive chair. Her brown hair was still tied in that haphazard bun, but the timid baker was entirely gone. In her place sat a digital warlord. Dustin stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of amber whiskey loose in his grip, watching her. He had spent his entire life surrounded by predators, men who communicated through violence, and women who weaponized their beauty, starving themselves into sharp, angular perfection to survive the brutal ecosystem of the mob. Penelope was an anomaly. She possessed a soft, heavy body that society told her to hide, yet her mind was a steel trap, entirely lethal and utterly unyielding. The sheer confidence she exuded while her plump fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard was intoxicating. He realized with a strange jolt of dark amusement that he found her terrifying and deeply alluring. "You're staring, Rossi," Penny murmured, not looking away from the 3 cascading monitors in front of her. Her voice was smooth, carrying that rich, authoritative alto tone that still sent a shiver of surprise down his spine. "I'm observing an investment," Dustin replied smoothly, taking a slow sip of his drink. He pushed off the glass pane and walked up behind her chair, looking over her shoulder. Lines of green and white code reflected in his dark eyes. "Tell me you have something. We've been locked in this study for 48 hours. My men are getting restless. Tony thinks I've lost my mind, bringing a baker into the inner sanctum." "Tony is a blunt instrument," Penny said dismissively, tapping a final key. The screen shifted from a chaotic scramble of code to a crystal-clear satellite map of the Boston Harbor. "You don't use a hammer to perform brain surgery, and right now, we are lobotomizing Liam O'Banion's entire supply chain." Dustin leaned closer, the scent of his expensive cedar cologne mixing with the faint, lingering smell of vanilla that still clung to Penny's skin. "Explain. O'Banion relies on the South Boston shipping terminals. Everyone knows that. But what you didn't know is that he isn't bribing the dock workers. He's manipulating the automated cargo manifest software," Penny explained, pointing a perfectly manicured, albeit slightly chubby, finger at a blinking red dot on the screen. "Every third Tuesday, a shipment of unregistered military-grade armaments comes in from Belfast hidden inside crates of industrial farming equipment. The software is coded to flag those specific shipping containers as inspected and cleared before they even touch the dock." Dustin's eyes narrowed. "If we hit the docks, it's an open war. It will be a bloodbath. I told you I want to dismantle him, not start a street war that draws the FBI." "We aren't hitting the docks," Penny said, turning her chair slightly so she was looking up at him. They were mere inches apart. She didn't shrink back from his proximity. Instead, she held his gaze, her dark eyes flashing with dangerous brilliance. "I already rewrote the code, Dustin. I changed the destination manifest while the ship was still in the middle of the Atlantic." Dustin went completely still. "You did what?" "When O'Banion's men go to the terminal tonight to collect their $10 million worth of assault rifles and explosives, they're going to find a dozen crates of organic, fair-trade Irish potatoes," Penny smiled, a wicked, triumphant expression that transformed her round face into something fiercely beautiful. "The actual weapons have been rerouted to a private rail yard in upstate New York. A yard that, according to these digital property deeds I forged this morning, belongs entirely to the Rossi Syndicate. We didn't just disarm him, we armed you." Dustin stared at her. The audacity, the sheer brilliant bloodless violence of the maneuver. He reached out, his leather-gloved hand gently cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed over the soft curve of her cheek. Penny's breath hitched, a momentary flicker of the vulnerable girl beneath the armor, but she didn't pull away. "You," Dustin whispered, his voice dark and gravelly, "are a masterpiece, Penelope." Before the tension could snap, the heavy oak door to the study slammed open. Tony barged in, his face red, a thick vein bulging in his thick neck. "Boss, we got a problem." Dustin's hand dropped from Penny's face, his expression instantly hardening back into the ruthless syndicate boss. "Knocking is an acquired skill, Tony." "What is it?" "O'Banion," Tony grunted, eyeing Penny with blatant distrust. "His men just tore apart the South Boston docks. They didn't find their cargo, but Liam didn't call the dockmaster. He called us." "Yes?" Dustin stepped away from the desk, buttoning his suit jacket. He left a message with the front desk at the Continental Hotel. "He wants a sit-down tomorrow night." "The annual charity gala," Tony said, crossing his massive arms. "He knows we had something to do with the missing shipment. Word on the street is he's bringing his top enforcer, Declan Sullivan." Dustin cursed under his breath. "If O'Banion knows we took the guns, then there's a leak." Penny's reroute was digital, invisible. Someone on our side had to have tipped him off that we were moving against his supply line. Penny turned back to her monitors, her mind already racing. A mole. That means the gala isn't a sit-down. It's a trap. "Cancel the appearance, boss," Tony urged. "We bunker down. We find the rat." "No," Penny interrupted, her voice ringing out clearly. She stood up. Despite being shorter and significantly heavier than the two Mafia enforcers in the room, she commanded the space. "If you don't show up, you project weakness. O'Banion will know he has you spooked." "We go to the gala," Tony scoffed, taking a menacing step toward her. "Listen here, Betty Crocker. You might be able to type fast, but you don't know the streets. You don't tell the boss what to do." Dustin raised a single hand, stopping Tony in his tracks. "Let her speak." Penny didn't flinch at Tony's intimidation attempt. "O'Banion thinks he has the upper hand because he has a mole in your organization. But he doesn't know about me. I'm a complete ghost to him. He's bringing Declan Sullivan, his lieutenant. Sullivan's phone is the central hub for O'Banion's entire operation. If I can get within 3 feet of Sullivan with a localized RFID skimmer, I can clone his device. We won't just find out who your mole is. We'll have the keys to O'Banion's entire kingdom." Dustin looked at her, his dark eyes calculating the immense risk. "You're talking about putting yourself in the middle of a Mafia summit, surrounded by armed men who would gladly put a bullet in your head if they knew who you were. You're a hacker, Penelope, not an operative." "I survived hiding in plain sight for 3 years, Penny countered, her chin lifting defiantly. "People look at me and they see a fat, harmless woman. Let me use that. Let me be the invisible girl one more time." Dustin remained silent for a long moment. Finally, a slow, predatory smile crossed his lips. "Fine. We go to the gala. But you're not going as a baker." Champagne flutes clinked softly against the backdrop of a live jazz quartet inside the Grand Continental Hotel. The grand ballroom was a sea of glittering chandeliers, silk drapery, and the most dangerous criminals on the eastern seaboard masquerading as philanthropic elite. Dustin Rossi stood near a towering ice sculpture, a glass of expensive bourbon in his hand. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders, radiating lethal elegance. But for the first time in his life, the whispers in the room weren't entirely about him. They were about the woman on his arm. Penelope Gallagher did not try to hide. When Dustin's stylists had arrived, she had rejected the black slimming gowns they pushed on her. Instead, she chose an emerald green velvet dress with a plunging neckline and a high, dramatic slit. The heavy fabric clung to her thick curves, accentuating the soft swell of her hips and the generous flare of her thighs. Her brown hair was swept up in a complex, elegant twist, and deep red lipstick painted her mouth. She looked opulent. She looked powerful. She was a masterclass in weaponized femininity, entirely unapologetic about the space she occupied. "Breathe, Penelope," Dustin murmured, leaning in close so his lips brushed the shell of her ear. To the outside observer, it looked like a lover's whisper. "I am breathing," Penny replied, her voice steady though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Hidden inside the small, jeweled clutch in her hand was a military-grade localized data skimmer. "I'm just scanning the perimeter. Half the men in this room are staring at you," Dustin noted, a strange edge of possessiveness bleeding into his tone. He wrapped his arm securely around her waist, pulling her plush body flush against his rigid side. "You look magnificent." A flush of heat rushed to Penny's cheeks, but she didn't have time to process the sudden, intense electricity coursing between them. Her eyes locked onto the entrance. Liam O'Banion had arrived. The Irish boss was an older man, silver-haired and sporting a perfectly trimmed beard, looking more like a retired senator than a ruthless killer. But trailing just behind his right shoulder was Declan Sullivan. Declan was built like a heavyweight boxer, his eyes darting around the room with paranoid intensity. "Target acquired," Penny whispered, seamlessly slipping into her operative persona. "I need 3 minutes. Get O'Banion's attention. Draw him away from the center floor." "Be careful," Dustin commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. He released her, stepping forward into the crowd to intercept O'Banion. Penny watched as the two titans of the underworld met, their smiles fake, their handshakes tight enough to crush bone. Declan Sullivan remained a few paces back, leaning against a marble pillar, aggressively tapping away on a secure smartphone. This was the moment. Penny took a deep breath, letting her shoulders relax. She channeled the clumsy, socially awkward Baker, overlaying it with the guise of a slightly inebriated socialite. She grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and began to weave through the crowd, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She timed it perfectly. Just as she passed the pillar, she feigned a stumble, her heel catching on the hem of her velvet gown. With a startled gasp, she pitched forward, crashing directly into Declan Sullivan's solid chest. "Hey, watch it!" Declan barked, stumbling back as the cold champagne splashed across his expensive suit jacket. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry." Penny cried, her voice pitching up into that breathy, panicked octave she had perfected. She frantically dabbed at his lapel with her bare hand, her jeweled clutch pressing directly against his suit pocket where he had just shoved his phone. Beneath the velvet of her bag, a small green light blinked. The skimmer activated. The progress bar in her mind started ticking. 10%, 20%. "Get off me, lady," Declan snarled, aggressively shoving her back. Penny stumbled, her heavy frame wobbling. I'm so clumsy. Please excuse me." "It's the heels," she stammered, their eyes wide with fabricated terror. 40%, 50%. She needed just a few more seconds. She dropped to her knees, pretending to search for an earring on the marble floor right at his feet. "I dropped my earring. It's a diamond. Please, just give me a second." Declan looked down at her, his face twisting in disgust. He saw exactly what he was conditioned to see, a desperate, clumsy, overweight woman making a fool of herself. He didn't see the predator in the velvet dress. "Pathetic," Declan muttered, turning his back on her to try and dry his jacket with a napkin. 80%, 90%, 100%, data cloned. A tiny silent vibration from her clutch signaled a completion. Penny swiftly grabbed a random piece of glass from the floor, stood up, and offered another frantic apology before scurrying away into the crowd. She didn't stop moving until she reached the private balcony overlooking the city lights. The crisp autumn air hit her flushed face. She snapped open the clutch, pulling out the skimmer and a small cable, instantly connecting it to a secure tablet hidden in the folds of her dress. Lines of decrypted text flooded the screen. She was inside O'Banion's network. The access was absolute, but she wasn't looking for his bank accounts yet. She was looking for the rat. Her fingers flew across the glass screen, running a reverse query on the last outgoing messages from Declan's phone to any number pinging off Rossi's localized cell towers. The search yielded a hit, a hidden encrypted contact labeled Oracle. Penny opened the message log. Oracle, Rossi hit the shipping manifest. Cargo rerouted. He's bringing the hacker to the gala. Target the woman in green. Penny's blood ran cold. The mole didn't just know about the shipment. The mole knew about her. She quickly traced the IP address of the burner phone associated with Oracle. The geographic locator pin dropped onto a digital map. It wasn't pinging from across the city. It was pinging from inside the hotel, inside the ballroom. "Gotcha," Penny whispered. She tapped the final node, revealing the registration data of the device. The name flashed on the screen. Arthur Pendleton, Dustin's lead financial advisor. The swaggering interest thing she truly noticed. He was the leak. Before Penny could turn to go back inside, a heavy hand clamped over her mouth. A massive arm wrapped around her waist, hauling her backward into the shadows of the balcony. The scent of stale tobacco and cheap cologne filled her nose. "Look what we have here," a rough voice whispered in her ear. The boss said to look out for a fat chick in a green dress playing with a tablet. "You're coming with us, sweetheart." Penny thrashed, driving her stiletto heel backward into the man's shin. He grunted, loosening his grip just enough for her to rip the tablet free and smash it against the brick wall, shattering the screen and destroying the local drive so O'Banion couldn't reclaim his cloned data. "You stupid bitch," the man snarled, grabbing her hair. As she was dragged toward the service stairs, Penny managed to scream just one word. "Dustin." Chaos erupted the second that single desperate cry cut through the ambient jazz and polite murmurs of the ballroom. Dustin Rossi didn't think. He simply reacted. The crystal bourbon glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor, but he was already moving before the shards settled. His slate-gray eyes locked onto the heavy mahogany doors leading to the service corridors. "Tony. Balcony." "No!" Dustin barked, his voice slicing through the elegant veneer of the party like a butcher's blade. He shoved past a bewildered senator, his hand instinctively dropping to the custom Glock concealed beneath his tuxedo jacket. Dustin hit the balcony doors with his shoulder, bursting into the crisp autumn night, just in time to see a massive shadow dragging a struggling emerald-green silhouette into the dimly lit service stairwell. Inside the concrete stairwell, Penny was fighting for her life. She wasn't a trained assassin, nor was she athletic, but she possessed sheer mass and a brilliant calculating mind. As the thug, a scarred brute named Connor, tried to hoist her over his shoulder, Penny intentionally went entirely limp, dropping her full heavy weight downward. The sudden shift in gravity threw Connor off balance. He grunted, stumbling forward against the iron railing. Capitalizing on the opening, Penny drove her elbow backward into his throat with everything she had. Connor gagged, his grip loosening just enough. Before Connor could recover and strike back, the heavy metal door above them was kicked off its hinges. Dustin stood at the top of the landing, a terrifying vision of absolute, unbridled wrath. He descended the stairs, not with frantic panic, but with the terrifying, predatory speed of a hunting leopard. Connor reached for the pistol at his waistband, but he was far too slow. Dustin grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it sharply until a sickening snap echoed through the concrete stairwell. Connor screamed, dropping the gun. Dustin followed up with a brutal strike to the man's knee, collapsing him, before grabbing him by the collar and slamming his skull against the cinder block wall. Connor slumped to the floor, unconscious. Dustin immediately turned to Penny, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands hovered over her, checking for injuries, his usually cold eyes wide with a frantic vulnerability he had never shown to another living soul. "Penelope, are you hurt?" "Did he touch you?" Dustin demanded, his voice thick with ragged adrenaline. Penny sat on the cold stairs, her chest heaving, her beautiful emerald dress torn at the shoulder, her dark hair tumbling out of its elegant twist. She looked up at him, her dark eyes still blazing with residual adrenaline. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. "I broke the tablet," Penny gasped out, her chest rising and falling heavily. "I destroyed the local drive before he could take it. O'Banion doesn't have the data." "Not." "I don't give a damn about the data," Dustin roared, the raw emotion surprising even himself. He reached out, pulling her soft, heavy body against his chest, burying his face in her hair. "I care about you. If I had lost you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The ruthless syndicate boss was trembling. Penny melted into his embrace for a fleeting second, allowing herself to feel the solid, protective warmth of his chest. But the digital clock in her mind was still ticking. The game wasn't over. She pulled back gently, framing his sharp, aristocratic face with her plump hands. "Dustin, listen to me. I got the name before I smashed the drive. The mole, the one feeding O'Banion your manifests. Nuts. Adfrul. Man. Shoo. What?" Dustin's expression instantly shifted from relieved lover to cold-blooded executioner. "Who?" "Arthur Pendleton," Penny stated, her voice dropping back into its calm, authoritative alto. "Your financial advisor. He sent a message to O'Banion's lieutenant telling him to target me tonight." Tony, who had just rushed down the stairs, stopped dead in his tracks. "Arthur? That sweating little weasel?" Dustin stood up, his jaw set in a rigid line of pure fury. He offered a hand to Penny, pulling her up with effortless strength. "Tony, clean up this trash," Dustin commanded, gesturing to the unconscious Connor. "Then lock down the ballroom exits. Nobody leaves. Find Arthur." "No," Penny interrupted, grabbing Dustin's arm. "If you kill Arthur now, O'Banion will know his spy is dead. He'll go to ground. He'll hide his assets. We need Arthur." Dustin looked down at her, his eyes narrowing. "He betrayed my family. He put a target on your back. I am going to peel him apart." "You will," Penny promised, a dark, wicked smile curving her red lips. The timid baker was entirely eradicated, leaving only the ruthless architect of digital ruin. "But first we are going to make him send one final message." 20 minutes later, the opulent penthouse of the Continental Hotel was transformed into a terrifying interrogation chamber. Arthur Pendleton sat tied to a heavy oak chair, sobbing uncontrollably. His expensive silk shirt was soaked in terrified sweat. Dustin stood by the window, silently smoking a cigarette, letting his sheer presence suffocate the room. But it was Penny who sat directly across from Arthur. She had removed her heels and was typing away on a fresh laptop Tony had procured from the hotel's security office. "Please, Mr. Rossi. They forced me." Arthur wept, straining against the zip ties. "O'Banion said he would kill my family. I only gave him shipping schedules, I swear." "You gave him me," Penny corrected softly, not looking up from her screen. "Which was a catastrophic miscalculation on your part, Arthur." She hit the enter key and turned the laptop around so Arthur could see the screen. It displayed his offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. "You have $4 million stashed away, Arthur." "Your severance package, I assume," Penny said, her tone conversational and light. "Watch." "Watch." She tapped a single button. The numbers on the screen rapidly scrolled downward. 4 million, 2 million, 500,000, 0. Arthur screamed, thrashing in the chair. "No, my money." "What did you do?" "I donated it to a ferret rescue sanctuary in Montana," Penny replied smoothly, closing the laptop. "Now, you have precisely nothing, unless you do exactly as I say." Arthur swallowed hard, staring at the heavy, beautiful woman who held his entire life in her hands. What do you want me to do?" "You are going to text Declan Sullivan," Penny instructed, handing Tony a burner phone to hold up to Arthur's face. "You are going to tell him that Dustin's new weapon shipment, The one I stole has been moved to the abandoned shipping warehouse on Pier 41. You are going to tell him that Dustin is going there tonight, personally, with a minimal security detail to inspect the goods." Dustin turned from the window, tossing his cigarette into a crystal ashtray. "You're baiting a trap." "I am building a slaughterhouse," Penny corrected, looking up at Dustin. Her dark eyes burned with the memory of her murdered brother. "O'Banion won't be able to resist taking you out and claiming the guns in one fell swoop. He'll bring his entire inner circle." "And when he gets there?" Tony asked, gripping the burner phone tightly. "When he gets there," Penny smiled, "I will lock the doors, and Dustin will introduce him to the new management." Midnight draped over Pier 41 like a heavy, suffocating blanket. The abandoned shipping warehouse was a cavernous structure of rusted iron and cracked concrete, smelling of salt water and decay. Inside, the space was illuminated by a few flickering halogen work lights, casting long, menacing shadows across the empty floor. Dustin Rossi stood in the center of the warehouse, completely alone. He wore a dark trench coat over his tuxedo, his hands resting casually in his pockets. Hidden in the catwalks above, invisible in the oppressive darkness, Tony and 24 of Dustin's most elite enforcers waited with suppressed automatic rifles. But the true weapon wasn't on the catwalks. 3 miles away, safely secured in the subterranean vault of the Rossi Syndicate's primary safe house, Penelope Gallagher sat before a massive wall of monitors. She was plugged directly into the city's fiber-optic grid, her fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard. She had full control of the warehouse's automated security doors, the local cell towers, and, most importantly, Liam O'Banion's private banking servers. The heavy steel doors of the warehouse groaned open. 3 black SUVs rolled into the cavernous space, their headlights cutting through the gloom. The doors opened, and a dozen heavily armed Irish enforcers stepped out, fanning into a defensive perimeter. Finally, Liam O'Banion emerged from the lead vehicle, flanked by the hulking Declan Sullivan. O'Banion smiled, adjusting the lapels of his tailored coat. Well, well, the great Dustin Rossi. Standing alone in the rusted tomb. "Arthur said you'd be arrogant enough to come with a light crew, but this is almost insulting." "I don't need a crew to deal with a dinosaur, Liam," Dustin replied, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You've been bleeding my territory for a year. You ordered a hit on a journalist, Thomas Gallagher, bringing heat onto my city. You've become a liability." O'Banion chuckled darkly. "Thomas Gallagher was a pest. I swatted him. Just like I'm going to swat you tonight, take your newly acquired weapons, and absorb your entire operation." "Shoot him." Declan raised his weapon, aiming directly at Dustin's chest. "Penny, now," Dustin said smoothly into the hidden earpiece beneath his collar. Miles away, Penny struck the final key. Instantly, the massive rolling steel doors of the warehouse slammed shut with a deafening crash. Heavy magnetic locks engaged, sealing the building shut with tons of pressure. The local cell towers immediately jammed, cutting off all outgoing signals from O'Banion's men. O'Banion flinched, looking around wildly. "What is this?" "Break the doors." "You can't," Dustin said, taking a slow, measured step forward. "Those locks are digitally controlled. And you no longer have the digital high ground, Liam. In fact, you no longer have anything." Above them, the warehouse ancient public address system crackled to life. Penny's smooth, dark voice filled the massive space, echoing like a digital goddess passing judgment. "Liam O'Banion." Penny's voice rang out, sending a visible shiver down Declan Sullivan's spine. 2 minutes ago, an automated algorithm bypassed your biometric firewalls in Zurich. Your offshore accounts have been drained. Your shell companies have been dissolved and reported to the IRS. Your legitimate real estate holdings have been anonymously transferred to the state of Massachusetts. As of this exact second, you possess exactly $0. O'Banion's face drained of all color. He pulled his phone from his pocket, frantically tapping the screen, but there was no signal. "Who is that? What is this trick?" "It isn't a trick," Penny's voice continued, cold and unyielding. "It is the consequence of your actions. You killed my brother Thomas. You thought he was a nobody. You thought his family was powerless. You look at people like me, people you deem weak, soft, or invisible, and you dismiss us. That the fat girl you ignored just dismantled your empire from a chair." Dustin smiled, a terrifying carnivorous expression. He raised his hand. The catwalks erupted in blinding spotlights, pinning O'Banion and his men in harsh, inescapable halos of white light. The red laser sights of 24 rifles painted the chests of the Irishing forces. O'Banion's men froze. They were outgunned, trapped, and, as they had just heard, completely unemployed. "Your boss is bankrupt," Dustin announced to the panicked enforcers. "He can't pay you. He can't protect you. Drop the weapons, and you walk out of here alive. Keep them raised, and you die in the dark." Ow. For 10 agonizing seconds, nobody moved. Then, one by one, the clatter of heavy weaponry hitting the concrete floor echoed through the warehouse. Even Declan Sullivan, realizing the absolute futility of the situation, slowly lowered his gun and kicked it away. O'Banion fell to his knees, his hands shaking as he stared at the empty screen of his useless phone. He was a king without a kingdom, a predator stripped of his fangs. Dustin walked up to O'Banion, looking down at the ruined man with absolute disdain. "Tell Arthur I said hello." He turned his back, letting Tony and his men handle the cleanup. Dustin didn't need to fire a single shot. The war had been won in silence, executed with beautiful, bloodless precision by the woman he was about to make his queen. At that man, a week later, Sweet Crumb Bakery reopened its doors. The shattered display cases had been replaced, the pastel pink walls repainted, and the scent of fresh vanilla and yeast once again wafted through the north end. Penny stood behind the counter, icing a tray of chocolate eclairs. She wore a beautifully tailored crimson wrap dress that hugged her curves perfectly, paired with a crisp white apron. She no longer hid her body. She stood tall, her shoulders back, a quiet confidence radiating from her every movement. The bell above the door chimed. Dustin Rossi stepped inside. He wasn't flanked by guards. He was dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit, his dark eyes locking onto Penny with a hunger that had nothing to do with the pastries. He walked up to the counter, leaning forward, resting his forearms on the glass. "Good morning, Miss Gallagher," Dustin murmured, his voice rich and low. "Good morning, Mr. Rossi," Penny replied, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "I don't have any $85 million routing numbers today. Just fogliatelle. Keep the money. Consider it an investment in our new partnership," Dustin said, reaching out to gently trace the line of her jaw with his knuckles. "O'Banion is behind bars, courtesy of an anonymous tip to the FBI regarding his tax evasion. Arthur is no longer practicing finance. The board is cleared." Penny leaned into his touch, her heart beating a steady, powerful rhythm. "And what happens now, Dustin?" Dustin stepped around the counter, invading her space. He wrapped his arms around her thick waist, pulling her flash against his chest. He didn't care about the flower on her apron. He didn't care about the rules of his dark world. He looked at the brilliant, beautiful, dangerous woman in his arms, and he knew he had found his equal. "Now," Dustin whispered, his lips brushing against hers, "we rule the city. Together." He kissed her, a deep, claiming kiss that tasted of sugar, power, and absolute surrender. The Mafia boss had walked into a bakery looking for a rat. Instead, he had found the only woman who could destroy him, and decided to give her his empire instead. If you loved this story of power, revenge, and hidden brilliance, please hit that like button. Don't forget to share this incredible Mafia drama with your friends who love a fierce, brilliant heroine who outsmarts everyone. Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our thrilling, real-life inspired stories. Drop a comment below telling us what your favorite twist was, and let us know what kind of story you want to hear next. Your support keeps these stories coming.